right. It is officially the year 2021. Okay, so we're starting with sections 4.4 and 4.5, and we're going to break them down into 2 weeks. We have a part 1 and a part 2. So part 1 is what we're going to focus on this week, and part 1 is about Pythagorean theorem. So we have 3 goals today. We're going to be able to use the Pythagorean theorem to find missing side lengths. We're going to be able to use the or to prove a triangle is a right triangle. And we're going to be able to use Pythagorean inequalities to classify triangles. Besides right, we also have acute and obtuse that we're going to work with today. So just a reminder, what is Pythagorean theorem? Well, Pythagorean theorem only works with a right triangle. So if you remember, a right triangle is a triangle that has one right angle, and that would be 90 degrees. Now your Pythagorean theorem is telling you this relationship that occurs between the side lengths of your triangle, and it's a simple formula that I know you've heard before, and that is c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Now, the important thing here is c. C is super duper duper important. Let me find another color. There we go. So c is always going to be the hypotenuse. AKA the longest side. And A and B are just the other two. Well, here's how you always identify the hypotenuse. You see where the right angle is, where that box is? If you go across from that box, this forever and for always will be your hypotenuse, also known as C in your formula. So I strongly suggest the first thing you always do is identify C. So first, always find C. You want to know what your C is because it's the easiest one to find. Find that box, you can identify what your C is. So let's go ahead and practice that. This is example 1. You'll see problems like this on your Google Form homework assignment. You'll have 10 of them. 2 of them are right here worked out in your notes. So find the missing side lengths. So let's start with this one right here. This right triangle that has side lengths 15.5, 13.7, and x. Now, first thing you always want to do is identify your hypotenuse. So I'm going to go across from my box, and I know that this right here is C. So if I was to write my formula, nope. All right, so we have C squared equals A squared plus B squared. A and B, it doesn't matter which one you make A or which one you make B. The important thing here is C. So we notice here in our example that C is x. So I can say x squared equals, and then I'm just going to take the other two and plug them in for A and B. So 12.5 squared plus 13.7 squared. All right, so take your calculator. Your phone can also do this. There it is. Let me show you. What do you want, Toshiba service station? Let me get to my calculator. So if your calculator is like this, you're not going to be able to square it. But if you turn it sideways, if you notice, you should have a button that is like an X with a 2 to it. That's your square button, okay? All right, so let's take our calculator, and you can just type it all in at once. So I'm going to go, okay, 12.5 squared. Can you all see that? Let me see if I do that. Woo! Okay, well, you can see it. Plus 13.7 squared, okay? And that gives us 343.94. So here's what we have. We have x squared equals 343.94. Now, that is not the length of your hypotenuse. There's one more thing you have to do. Squares and square roots go together. That's the symbol that looks like this. Again, this is also in your phone, and it looks like, it might glare because that light's on, so I might have to turn the light off again. I'll show you. In your phone, you will see it can look like, is it glaring? No. It can look like that. It can also look like, it is glaring. There we go. It can look like that, or it can look like, come on phone, work with me. Or it can have like a 2 right there where it checks up. That also means square root. All right, clear. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so we're going to take the square root of 343.94, and our answer is 18.5. So our final answer is that x equals 18.5. Okay, let's do another one. So let's look at this example we have over here. Our side links are x, 13.5, and 5.1. Again, the important thing to do is identify your c first, because it's the one that's in a picky spot in your equation. So I'm going to go across from my box, and this is what c equals. So let's solve this thing. We've got c squared equals a squared plus b squared. C is the most important, so I'm going to plug that in. 13.5 squared equals, and again, a and b, it doesn't matter which one you make which. So I'm going to have x squared plus 5.1 squared. Okay, now let's go ahead and square these. Again, use your calculator, please. So I'm going to go 13.5 squared. I get 182.25. And then I'm going to go 5. I'm going to get 26.01. All right, now, you're like, okay, well, after we did the squaring on this one, we went ahead and square rooted. We're not doing that yet. We have to get the x squared by itself. And if you notice, it's being added by 2001. This is always going to happen. It's always going to be addition. So we're always going to subtract to get it by itself on these problems. So I'm going to subtract. Use your calculator. Use the tools that you have, the technology at our fingertips to make life easier. I get 156.24 equals x squared. Now that x squared is alone, there's nothing else happening to it. Now we can square root to get our final answer. Again, this is just a button on your calculator. And we get 12.5. Okay, again, you have 10 problems like this on your Google form. Now, rule number 2. And my notes messed up for some odd reason. Able to look clean, but there's plenty of room for us to solve it. Now, converse of the Pythagorean theorem. This says if we have a right triangle, then this. This is saying the same thing but backwards. So it's saying if c squared equals a squared plus b squared. Again, c this time is more or less known as the longest side, forever and for always. Even when we go to our inequalities, the longest side is always c. If this happens, then you have a right triangle. So you'll have 10 problems like exam form that you're going to do. And you're either going to say, yes, it's a right triangle, or no triangle. So let's go ahead and set up our equation. So we're going to say c squared equals a squared plus b squared. All right, so our side lengths are 16, 17.8, and 12. So we want to find our longest side because that one's going to be c. Well, this would be our longest. Therefore, it is c. So we're going to say 17.8 squared needs to be equal to 16 squared plus 12 squared. Again, we're just going to type it in our calculators, okay? So I'm going to say 17.8 squared, and I get 316.84 is equal to 16 squared plus 12 squared. Gives us 400. Now, the question is, are they equal? Nope, they're not. They are not equal. No, it does not create a right triangle. And you'll have 10 questions like that. This is one of your questions on your homework, so you already have the answer to 3 questions on all of your homework so far. Now, our last goal for today are Pythagorean inequalities. Okay, remember inequalities deal with greater than or less than signs, and that's what's going to come into play here. So if we're talking about less than or greater than, here's the easiest way to remember it. Less than means small, What else means small? Acute or obtuse. Why, that would be acute. So it would be c squared is less than a squared plus b squared. And remember, c, forever and for always, from now on, is going to be the longest side. Okay. Obtuse is whenever c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared. And again, c is your longest side. All right, so let's do some examples, and this is your last example for today. Classify the triangles. So we're going to use our formulas up here to determine whether they are acute or obtuse. Now, when you do your homework, you're going to have three options. You're going to have right, acute, or obtuse to pick from. I don't have the example of a right triangle that's on your notes. Is that right there? Whether this happens or not, okay? If this was equal, it would be a right triangle. So just remember, equal is whenever it's right. So let's practice our inequalities. So our formula, we don't really know which one to use. We don't know what's going to go in there, but we do know it's c squared something, a squared plus b squared, right? We have this question mark. This right here is going to tell us our final answer. So let's go ahead and find c. So we have 13.5, or 31.5, 30, and 42. The longest side is always c. So our longest one is 42. So that's going to be c because it's the longest. So I'm going to say, all right, 42 squared. Then I'm just going to plug in my other ones. I've got 31.5 squared plus 30 squared. Now let's use our handy dandy calculators to assist us in said problem. So 42 squared. We've got 1,764. And then we have 31.5 squared plus 30. All of that in your calculator at one time. And we get 1,892.25. Now, remember your inequalities. The shark or the Pac-Man, however you think about it, is going to eat the larger number. So out of these two, this one is the largest one. So I'm going to look. What does it mean whenever c is less than? That will be acute. So this would be an acute triangle. All right. Last example, and I know I move kind of fast through these videos. Remember, you can always pause, rewind. You can take this video at any speed you need, okay? All right, let's do this again. We don't know what our inequality is. So we would say c squared, a squared plus b squared. This is our unknown. Okay, let's find our c. Our c, again, is the longest side. So we have 7.6, 3.8, and 9.5. The longest one is going to be c. Well, that would be 9.5. And if you notice, yeah, I noticed they're both on the right here. That's not always going to happen, all right, kiddos? So we have 9.5 squared. And then our other two, we have 7.6 squared plus 3.8 squared. Now let's use our handy-dandy calculators to find our final answer. So we've got 9.5 squared. That gives us 90.25. And we've got 7.6 squared plus 3.8 squared. That gives us 72.2. Now remember, shark or Pac-Man, however you want to think about it, it's going to eat the larger number. So 90 is larger than 72, so I'm going to see which one says if c squared is greater than. Well, that would be obtuse. Okay, you have 10 questions like these as well. 2 of them have been worked out for you today in your notes. If you have any questions, please send me a remind message. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful rest of your week.